Hey guys, this is John, and I am playing Dreamshell in the 15-minute pool on ICC. So Dreamshell is playing the Sicilian, and this could be our maybe third consecutive game in the Sicilian. Do I want to play the Roslimo again? No, I'm going to play a mainline this time around against Dreamshell. Sir Dreamshell. No Kalashnikov. He might be angling for a Sveshnikov. He does. Okay, been a while since I played the white side of Sveshnikov. So let us see what will take place in this one. So this is all standard. Now after b5, white can play bishop takes f6 or knight d5. And I usually play knight d5. I don't know as much about the bishop takes f6 lines. So, yeah, I think I'll probably do knight d5. All right, so here it's interesting to take on e7 actually, but most of the time people play bishop takes f6 as opposed to knight takes e7. So I will do that. Now I have to decide after this between c3 and c4. c4 was recently recommended in a book that I plan on reviewing called Modernize the Open Sicilian by Zhany Bekhamanov and Kostya Kavutsky, both guys from California. I don't know the details of that move yet, but it might be interesting to play and then check up in the book later. So I'm thinking about doing that. I just don't know exactly what the plans are in the resulting position. But you know what? I like to experiment on this channel to get a wide variety of positions, so let's do it. And it'll make good fodder for discussion as well. So there's some ramifications of playing c4 rather than c3. So compared to c3, with c4, white gains excellent control over d5. That square is extremely well fortified now, but I lose control over d4. You give and you get in chess, and I lose control over that d4 square, which is prime opportunity for his knight to come into it at some point. So usually they play b4 in this position and then knight c2. And I think a5 and bishop e2 is the move. The game can proceed kind of positionally for a while. I get the impression that this line mostly leads to protracted strategic battles.
Check.
There's not a lot of opportunity for open play, I don't think. Queen a5 I'm not at all familiar with. Okay, I'm completely on my own now. This actually makes me question whether I'm messing up the move order, but I don't think I am. So b4 would lose my knight. That would be horrible. I mean, I could play knight c7, but I don't want to mess with that. Moreover, b4, knight takes b4 might be possible. King e2 is obviously bad, so I have to play queen d2. So queen e2, he takes. I mean, I'm threatening c7. I'm also threatening b5, so let's do this. We'll just pre-move that capture. I mean, I wonder if he's playing this as a pawn sacrifice. Bishop g5 check is a move. If he goes bishop g5 check, yeah, I can't play f4 because he has bishop takes f4. I mean, I could play that, but then after a trade on f4, I take b5. He's probably not completely bent out of shape about that. I think king d1 is the best move in this position, or at least it feels like the best move. Yeah, let's do king d1. I didn't want to go to e1 because I'd rather stay on a light square. Later on, I can play bishop d3, and my king will undoubtedly be in the way of my two rooks. But given that I'm threatening knight c7 check and also just c takes b5 in this position, I have to think that this bodes well for white. I also don't get the impression that this is like a pawn sacrifice line that black can play as a surprise weapon. It just his timing doesn't indicate to me that this is prepped by him or that he has knowledge of this line. I'm expecting him to castle right now. He has to deal with knight c7 somehow. And I really shouldn't waste any time playing this next move, because if I don't try to win the pawn on b5, my entire strategy has been for naught in the opening. So I'm not about to sit here and not take that pawn. Okay, so knight d4. This is all very interesting. So if I take on a6, he takes with the bishop. Knight c7, he has bishop takes g2. Knight takes a8, take on bishop takes f1, I mean. Knight takes a8, bishop takes g2, rook g1, bishop f3 check. Looks bad for me. Something about that line. I could play knight c7 right away. That would be interesting. How would that play out? So knight c7, I'm attacking his rook. He moves it somewhere, let's say rook b8. I could take on a6 with the pawn. He takes on b2. It's getting rather sharp. You know what I could also do is throw in h4. I wonder how that shapes up. If I throw in h4, I'm just thinking it might knock his bishop off balance. And if he were to play, let's say, bishop h6, then I could potentially play knight e7 check, king h8, knight takes c8, and then grab the pawn on a6. That's what I like about that. So h4 is pretty intriguing. If h4, bishop g4 check, I can play f3 safely. Yeah, there's no trouble with that. Knight takes f3 is nothing. So h4. There's also knight b6 too. Knight b6, rook b8, knight takes c8, rook f takes c8, take on a6. I'm just wondering in a lot of these lines if he gets to take on b2, whether he has enough. Because there's some threats around my king, like rook d2 check. It's not a one-way street. I think the line I like best is this h4 move, so let's do that. Potentially he can play bishop d8, but I think he wants to keep his bishop for offensive purposes on the current diagonal. So I'm anticipating bishop h6 and then knight e7 check, king h8, knight takes c8. Let's say rook f takes c8, b takes a6. And the big question is, does he have anything to show for the two pawns there? I'm really inclined to say no, because I mean, he has a threat on, or not even a threat on c1, pressure on c1, but my rook does a good job of covering it. I can play bishop c4 after that. I'll be almost fully developed. I mean, the only question is my king in the center. But no, I don't think that's sound for him. One pawn maybe, but two pawns, especially with three of my pawns being passed, potentially passed on the queen side, and the a6 pawn being dangerous in every line, I'm skeptical. Wow, he does play bishop d8. That might be a good decision, actually. He probably made a good practical decision there. I mean, if I take on a6 and we trade, I'll have to watch out for knight b3. If I were to play something like, knight c4, knight c2. Oh, knight c2 would work, though. Knight c2 would work. Because then knight b3 would fail to a takes b3, and I'm defending my rook. Aha. So, possible argument in favor of playing this move. Taking on a6 is so obvious here. Yeah, I'm not going to think about it too much longer. We're just going to do it. If bishop g4, I can play f3. He takes on f3. I always have bishop e2 if I need it. So I'm not concerned about that line. So I'm thinking the game will go bishop takes a6, bishop takes, rook takes, knight c2. He can't play knight b3. That's important because a takes b3, like I said. So if we trade knights, I'll be up a pawn with my knight, very well placed on d5. He'll have to start looking for active stuff like f5 then, but I just don't think he has enough in that position. So I can also play knight c2 right away. Could that be a small improvement, maybe? Don't know if it's worth wasting a lot of time over that, but so bishop takes a6, rook takes a6, knight c2. Let's say we swap knights. He plays f5. That's one of the few active moves he can make. E takes f5, rook takes f5, f3, e4. He's getting a tiny amount of play there. just because of stuff like f takes e4, rook f2 check. I mean, knight c2 right away might be actually an idea. But then he could swap knights and maybe bring this bishop back somewhere. I'd rather simplify. So I think I will do this. Yeah, I think it's almost mandatory to play this move now. He immediately goes for f5. Okay, so I think he kind of saw what was about to happen. I don't know, I might have traded first on c2 if I were him before going for this. Guess we'll find out, but... So I take d4, he takes. If f3, he takes and then comes into f2. It's annoying. See a line that secures a lot of stuff for me. So knight takes d4, e takes d4, knight b, e takes f5 then, rook takes f5, knight b4, hitting his rook. Idea that after he moves that rook, I can play knight d3. My knight is absolutely perfect on that square. That is a gorgeous square because it defends both b2 and f2. Yeah, I gotta do that. Move order is important. After it takes, I must play e takes f5 first, I think. Yeah, because if I move my knight first, he can attack my knight, and then if the knight goes to d3, he takes. So I got to get rid of this one first. Just double checking to make sure I'm not missing any sort of tactical idea. I don't think so, though. So rook takes, knight b4. This rook has to move. Yeah, knight d3. I think he sees it now. I think he sees what I'm up to. But, I mean, if not rook takes f5, what else? There's not really anything for black. In a perfect world, I would have seen this prior to doing this whole line with bishop takes a6. I mean, I saw him trading on c2 first and then this type of thing. Which, by the way, if my king were on c2 and his pawn were on e5, this wouldn't work as well because rook takes f5, knight b4, he has rook takes f2 check. But with my king on d1, there's no in-between move check. He definitely sees my plan now. That's why he's thinking for so long. Unfortunately for him, I don't think he can do anything about it because if he tries to play a move to cover b4, like, you know, bishop a5 or something, yeah, I mean, he wouldn't even be threatening rook takes f5 then because of knight e7. So there's not really any good move. He can play rook a5, but knight b4 will probably be close to transposing. I might even have some extra options with knight c6 then. So technically speaking, this is looking great for me. It will not be winning once I get my knight to d3, but I'll be up a solid pawn. I mean, his pawns are doubled. My knight is blockading them, which is a perfect square. I mean, as far as pieces that can blockade pawns, knights are like at the top of the list of pieces that you want doing that. And also it's centralized, even better. It's able to look at both wings. Yeah, I played Dreamshell. I don't remember the details of our previous game, but I played this guy one time before. Where to place his rook? He's probably going to go to b6, but knight d3 all the same. My goals after that will just be to defend everything. I might even play g3, so I can free up my h-rook. Currently, that rook is needed to defend the h-pawn. So I'd probably play like g3 and then maybe bring my king up somewhere, like possibly d2. Depends if he has bishop a5 check or not. Coordinate my rooks and slowly start marching these pawns. Or maybe march some of the pawns first and then coordinate my rooks after that. Okay, so zero reason not to play knight d3, so I'll do that. My only pawn weaknesses now are a2 and kind of h4. I mean, g2 is undefended, but he can't attack it. Moreover, it's probably going to g3 anyways. So he can only try to attack my rook pawns, but they're so easy to defend. And if rook a5, I have a3. It's super simple. So I think this position is basically technically winning for white. That doesn't mean that I'm going to win instantly, like I said. It's important to keep that in perspective. So they're two very different things, being technically winning and actually winning. So this is an interesting idea. I was just wondering if he could do this. I think he's trying to run his king to the center. He's trying to get it to d5. And he might be arguing that I have to spend a tempo playing g3, so I can't play rook e1 right now to keep him out. It's an interesting idea. I mean, I don't know that that will change the balance of the position too much. Yeah, it shouldn't do much of anything to the position, actually. I mean, if king e6, rook e1 check, king d5, I can play rook c1, and I'd be threatening knight b4 and knight f4. That just looks amazing. So he could be getting his king in all sorts of trouble there. He probably won't go much further. I don't think he'll play king e6 now. g3 does weaken f3, but rook f3 is, I can expel his rook with king e2, so no big deal. I predict he'll try to make a pawn break on the king side soon. Like maybe he'll go h6 and then g5, because he has almost nothing else to do. His rooks have no targets, so what is there to do? Just check. Throw in this check and see where he goes with his king. I'm thinking he'll play king d7. Well, he actually does play that. All right, well now rook c1, and he's somewhat cornered. I also have rook e8 if I want it. Rook e8 is interesting. But I think I'd rather save that move and go rook c1, just to cut him off on the c file. Yeah, he resigned. Okay, he saw what was coming, or he just hated his position. Yeah, so I was going to play this move, and then boom and boom is possible. But let's go back and take a look. So in a game posted 2 games ago, I played bishop e5 in this position. Went for the Rosslimo, but in this one I played d4. Now black could enter the Kalashnikov if he wanted with e5, but my opponent played knight f6 and went for the Sveshnikov instead. Now in this position, those of you who watched my book review on The Killer Sicilian will know that this scenario is very similar. If white plays anything except knight db5, black is at least equal. That's known. If you're white, you have to play knight db5 here if you want any sort of an advantage. You have to hone in on that weak d6 square. Nothing else will do. So now d6, bishop g5, a6. I was forgetting this line. I think if white wants to enter that bishop takes f6 line I was talking about, they should do it here. So that queen takes f6 is met by knight c7 check. So black has to take with a pawn. Yeah, this is the better way to enter this line, I believe. I think I mentioned that after a6, knight a3 here, bishop takes f6 is possible, which it is, but I wonder if that gives black the extra option of queen takes f6. I don't know. I'll have to check up on that. That's something I've always wondered, but like I don't ever get into these positions, so I wouldn't know for certain. But to most of my students, I actually recommend just the knight a3 line because it's more positional. Bishop takes f6 is a more tactical way of playing this. Many people consider this to be the absolute test of the Sveshnikov. I personally have never been attracted to these positions. They can get very sharp. White giving up the bishop pair, and black can often strike back. There's this so-called Novosibirsk variation, which is one of the very main lines of the Sveshnikov. So knight a3, b5, knight d5, bishop e7. Yeah, so there's a variety of options here for white with the minor piece tension because white has to relieve this now with knight takes d5 being such a palpable threat. So, or knight takes e4 maybe. But knight takes e7 is one line, just trying to go for the bishop pair. And there's also bishop takes f6. So those are your main options. I almost always play bishop takes f6, so that's what I did in this game. Now, I've never played this line with c4, But like I said, it was recommended in the Modern Sicilian, which I will be reviewing on my channel very shortly, probably in the next week or so. Usually I play c3, which has plans that are a little easier to understand. Basically, after castles, let's say, usually white goes knight c2, so you start rerouting this knight. And then white can play bishop e2 and castle themselves. They also might go for an early a4 to disturb this pawn structure. It's very common. And this knight on c2 will come to e3 in order to reinforce d5 in most cases. Not all the time, like sometimes it goes through b4, but that's the whole point of c3, knight c2. Because the knight on a3 stands poorly, there's no doubt about that. It can't sit there for much longer. So this c4 move is very interesting, though. And I was under the impression that the main line is b4, knight c2, a5. So that's why I was surprised that my opponent played queen a5 check, because I was looking forward to a game like this, and I was going to go bishop e2 and then castle, castle. And this is about the extent of my theoretical knowledge. I just know it leads to like an interesting middle game that the authors of that aforementioned book, Amanov and Kavutsky, they think white can get a small advantage here from what I quickly read about this. So let's turn on the engine now, starting with queen a5 check, and just see what is up with this resulting position. So queen d2, offer the queen trade.
Check.
He takes me up on it. And this position would not be good for white if not for the dual threats of knight c7 and taking on b5. I mean, if only one of those things were threatened, yeah, I mean, black's fine. Black might even have an advantage because they have the bishop pair and white's king is in the center.
Check.
But this is reality, and black has to deal with both of those threats. Yeah, he castled now. The line I'm actually just looking at right now is what happens if rook b8? I guess I can just bank this pawn. Or what if b4? Idea being, if knight c2, then rook b8 covers both threats, knight c7, and it defends b4. But I guess, the critical test would definitely be b4, knight c7 check, king moves somewhere, let's say king e7, take here, take here. I guess my knight can always escape through one of these squares, so it's not in danger of getting trapped. This just seems kind of interesting because black gets the use of the d4 square. If bishop g4, yeah, I mean, can do this. This might not be like that terrible for black, though. The computer says white's solidly better, which I'm sure is the case, but I mean, my structure is a complete mess, and black has two fairly active minor pieces, especially this knight, which gets into d4. I don't know if that line is best play for both sides, but I wonder about b4. I didn't really think about this move during the game, but knight c7 check, king e7 looks best. Take, b takes, pretty much have to take that pawn. So b takes, yeah, and check.
Check.
f3 is forced.
Check.
Black nabs a pawn, and then does that. I wouldn't mind like giving this a shot with black. I'm not saying black's better by any means. They're just worse, but it might not be that bad. Maybe the only trouble is white can play bishop d3 and defend f3 if they need to. Well, they might be kind of passive. Like if this rook has to come to f1 and black can plant the knight on d4, maybe black has enough. Black has enough pawns, that's for sure. We're equal on pawns. So it's just a pure exchange, but the structural compensation and the minor piece activity could make the game interesting. I've mentioned this before on videos, but like when you see an eval, like in this position, so white is up 2 points of material, according to conventional just point counting. I have a rook against one of his minor pieces and our pawns are equal. But the engine is only giving me like a 3/4 pawn advantage. So why is that? How do we interpret that? Well, you interpret that as the engine thinks black has some compensation. If it wasn't the case, white would just be +2 or more to, roughly translate to the 2 points of actual material I have. But the fact that it's like 1.25 evaluation points, base unit pawns, lower than what I actually have, that indicates that the computer thinks black has compensation. So that's how you interpret that. So, okay, going back, yeah, that looks like his best chance. I mean, it's interesting, because in the game, he only loses like one pawn if he takes back, but that other line we just looked at looks way more testing. So this position was interesting. Knight d4, I wonder what the engine will think about my move, h4. Doesn't like it. Maybe it'll come around. Come on, engine, come around. You know you like this move. The evaluation's kind of bouncing all over. It says I should just take on a6 right away. Bishop takes, rook takes. Now h4. Maybe that's similar. What? That just transposes to what I was trying to do, engine. So maybe it actually could transpose. Let's see. h4. Yeah, I think he made the right call with bishop d8, because if this, my idea was check here and now take. Rook f takes and then takes. So this is kind of closer to the scenario I was just talking about. Like here, I'm up 2 pawns, 2 points of material, and the engine is actually giving me right around +2. So that means the engine doesn't think white has, or black has any compensation for the pawns, which is true. So, so he played bishop d8. I took on a6. So if black wants to gain compensation here, they have to play in craftier fashion. So f5 immediately. Yeah, that changes things a little bit, playing it this early. So I guess the thinking is that this pawn is a goner anyways, so you don't have to take it right away. And if e takes, now we take on a6. Really? And if bishop takes here? Well, let me just be full-fledged greedy right now. h5. Okay, so it's not easy to defend the pawn on f5. That's subtle, though. I mean, given the speed that he was playing, I mean, how much time did he spend on this next move? He has 11:44. He took it in, yeah, like 15 seconds. He probably just didn't anticipate the troubles that are coming up, and he kind of just assumed that he had to take the pawn, which admittedly, I did too. I didn't really think black could play a move like f5 because it didn't cross my mind. But the game continuation is pretty convincing, I think. Knight c2. And I'm pretty sure he should take on c2. This would be more testing. And now f5. I wasn't entirely sure what I would do with this line. I was thinking e takes, rook takes, f3. But can he go e4? That's the big question. Attacking my knight and double attacking this pawn. I can take, but he has this check. And he can try to make it messy. The computer still thinks I'm quite a bit better, but I mean, he would have taken this scenario over the one in the game where my knight is coming to d3 in a heartbeat. This is way more enticing for black. If you're the side defending, you're desperate, you would much rather defend a messy position or versus a position where you have very little counterplay. Even if objectively the evaluation is the same, you'd always prefer the messy position if you're defending. At least I would most of the time. It's about control. You don't want your opponents to feel that they have complete control over the position. And in the position we got in the game, with my knight coming to d3, I like instantly relaxed at that point because I knew that I had very excellent control over the position. So here, e takes f5. Yeah, I think he just missed this knight b4 to d3 concept. Rook a8, knight d3. Yeah, and it doesn't look that bad, according to the computer. I mean, plus, no, let's say somewhere between 1.25 and 1.5, but that's a plus 1.5 where black has almost nothing to do. And it seems like I can improve my position endlessly, and he's just awaiting the executioner, basically. g3. You can see he was not happy about this position because he tried to do something active, but you just really can't here. There's not much to do. Like I said, the a-pawn is one of my few weaknesses. Maybe the king side kind of, although with g3 I covered h4. And a move like rook fa5 is just immediately parried by this. So I think this is just a technical win. Let's follow the computer's top line. So king e6, I probably would have checked. King d7. I'd probably play something like rook c1. And it's just too easy for white here. I have moves like rook c4. I can bring my king up. I'll slowly start advancing my A and B pawns. These pawns are discounted. He's not going to hold this. I mean, I've blown better positions than this, but I say with like 95% confidence he's not going to hold that position.
Check.
So, yeah, and now he resigned, but I was going to play rook c1, and the dual threats of this and this are tremendous. Just winning. If bishop a5, I can run to e7 was my plan. Keeping the knight f4 threat alive and also threatening to raid his kingside pawns. So, yeah, interesting game. And, I think the book that I wanted to reference, the modernized Open Sicilian book, it's in my car. So maybe I'll post in the comments when I get a chance to look at it and see what it says about, I think, queen a5. See if it even mentions that move for black. It actually looks somewhat interesting in view of the line I was talking about with b4 right here, if he had ventured this move and given up the rook in the corner. And I also want to see what the book has to say about just the main line, which I believe is b4. So I wonder if castling is even possible. There might be some lines where black can sacrifice the pawn on b5. That's probably also in the book. So I'll get back to you guys about that in the comments. Anyways, thank you guys for watching, and I will be back tomorrow with another 15-minute game. Talk to you guys later. Bye.